Good morning. It is 6:30. If you're a 6:30 riser, so many of you are, and you've got your legs over the side of the bed, and you're going, "Oh my God, it's only Tuesday." I understand. I understand. I commiserate, but you know what? It's summer. We'll get by, and if it's a 50-foot walk to where you work, because many of us are doing that these days, it's not so bad. Have yourself a cup of coffee. I had two, and I'm going to tell you, it wires you. Two big black cups of coffee, and off you go. Look, this is not a pleasant topic, this next one, but it is a topic about reality. You know, you lost your job over COVID-19. Perhaps you've got it back there, or somewhere in the vicinity of only 1.5 million people not back at work yet. But it isn't only, because there were so many people who were disenfranchised from their working environment back in March, and now we're down to only 10 point whatever percent unemployment in Canada, which by comparison is wonderful, and 1.5 million people who are not back on the job, which by comparison is wonderful, but not if you're one of them. And even if you are back at work, the dent in your income, having been on CERB instead of your normal salary, may be significant. So you lose your job, but what if you lose your marriage as well? And we've seen an increase in couples who are basically facing financial hardship that is, that's probably up there in the top three. Maybe it's the number one reason for splits in the first place. We're joined this morning by Laura Paris, who is a lawyer with Shulman and Partners, and I can ask Laura. Good morning.
Good morning.
So you've heard my little preamble. I guess we are seeing a bit of a bump there, and that's unfortunate.
Absolutely. So, I mean, even in normal times, financial issues in relationships are definitely one of the leading causes of separation. So, when you couple that with the pandemic, job losses, and kind of being forced and secluded into your home, you're definitely seeing a rise in conflict and a rise in people who are contemplating separation.
Well, financial problems, as you say, have always been a big deal in divorces because, you know, when you sit down at night, and it's the kind of, some people have offices in their home, of course, but it's kind of the kitchen table conversation. What are we going to do is the operative phrase. And, you know, the answers to that often begin with, well, if you hadn't, no, fill in the blanks. And that's where the fighting starts. And when the fighting gets rough, and I'm not talking about physical, though sometimes that too, you wind up with troubles, and those troubles can lead to a split. What's the first thing you have to do? I mean, to me, it would be, before we see you, a lawyer, it would be try to conciliate and calm down. And I guess that's what you would recommend as well.
Absolutely. I mean, when we have clients call in for consultations, you know, one of the first things that we try to ascertain in these consultations are whether or not this person is actually ready to be considering the separation, or whether there are still other steps that they need to take before they're ready to make that final decision. So something such as, you know, considering marriage counseling, or even speaking to a mediator before deciding to hire a lawyer, is something that we definitely recommend.
Sure. So according to StatsCan, the labor force survey, which is routine in non-COVID times, but it's showing radically different stats now, it came out last week. And as of July, employment is, as I said, about 1.3. Unemployment is about 1.3 million at this point, and that's according to a measurement against pre-COVID February. And according to a survey from the Canadian Payroll Association, a third of Canadians who have not lost their job due to COVID are still worried about it happening. So you've got pressures in all kinds of households. And another statistic, 58% of the working 4,000 Canadians surveyed in the StatsCan also feel more stressed about their finances. So the stress is not limited to people who have had employment problems. The stress is about the environment that we're in. Stress is not a great thing.
It's definitely not a good thing, and it definitely puts a lot of pressure on a relationship. And you know, it's really a testament to your relationship being able to get through something like this, particularly when you're looking at situations where you know, like we said, people are losing their jobs, their cash flow isn't the same. People have seen, you know, drops in their investments. People are not 100% sure what, you know, the markets are going to look like in a year from now, and that's the housing market, the stock market, et cetera. So there are a lot of uncertainties that we've gone through and that are still continuing to walk through. And this is certainly something that puts a strain on a relationship and could lead to conflict in a home.
Okay, so Laura, let's draw a line there because now we've talked about the lead up. Let's suppose that we're talking to people, and I know we are out there. It's unfortunate but true, who are saying, "Okay, we're going to split. We've made this decision, and there's nothing on God's green earth that's going to keep us from doing it." How do you set about dividing assets and dividing debts as well? Because people have built up debts. Who pays for those? And how do you split a house when it's one house? Who gets it? There are so many questions. How do you start?
What we start with is financial statements. So we want to kind of get a running list of what each party's assets and liabilities are, so we can figure out the best way to split things. In every family law situation, there's always what the loss is, and then there's creative solutions that we can come up with that make sense for you and your family. A lot of people, one of the biggest things when it comes to finances that people are very motivated by is their matrimonial home. A lot of people have, especially when there's children involved, a lot of people have this notion that a house is that the house has some very, very important sentimental value to the family and to the children, and a lot of people fight over that. Who's going to keep the house, and at what price are we going to buy the house out, etc. Especially in a time like today, when you're dealing with people that are facing job losses, you have to think about the fact that lifestyle, when your lifestyle has already changed due to the fact that you've lost a job, think of how much more drastic that change is going to be when now you're deciding to basically take your wealth and split it in half and have to support two different lifestyles, but on the same or a reduced salary. So that's something that's really stressful as well, and kind of makes people feel a bit hopeless because they're wondering, how are we going to do this? It was difficult enough when we were doing it as one unit with two salaries coming in. How are we going to do it now, taking these two salaries, splitting them in half, and then trying to, support the same lifestyle for both people? So those I would say are two of the biggest hurdles that people try to overcome. And the reality is that you do have to accept your financial reality, and sometimes you can't maintain the same lifestyle that you had while you were married, and that's particularly so with the effects of the pandemic. And sometimes the reality is that you need to downgrade.
Well, it's a mess and it's misery. I mean, when people make a decision to split, they're making a decision to feel even worse for a period of time with the hope that ultimately they feel better, and it's not necessarily so. But let's keep it to the nitty-gritty here. You talk about a financial statement. Now, as I understand Ontario family law, the financial statement looks like, here's our total assets minus debts, because we have to split those debts, and then we have a net of what the assets are worth. And then, because we once upon a time got married and each partner brought something to the marriage, might have been a bank account, might have been a family home, might have been something, you've got to take that out of the equation in order to split 50-50 on what you had gained and accumulated, if indeed there's an accumulation, since the two of you tied the knot. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. So essentially what you're doing is you're trying to take a tally of your net worth, and then there's certain credits that could be applied. So date of anything that you brought into the marriage, with some exceptions, things that you brought into the marriage act as a credit for you, a deduction for you, and then there's also exclusions if you received inheritances. Throughout the marriage or during the marriage, that would be something that would be excluded from your net property unless you commingled it with joint funds. So it could be a very simple process. There could be some assets that complicate the process and bring a cause for question. But that's why we have to start with the financial statement to know what we need to do to move this forward and to get things finalized.
Well, I know you're a lawyer, so you're going to speak in favor of lawyers, and there's nothing wrong with that because there there are instances in life, and this is probably one of them, where we really need professional help. And I want you to address that, because it's not just lawyers. It could be accountants. It could be financial professionals. It could even be forensics financial professionals. There are all kinds of people who can contribute to the tally that it's going to cost you, because there's a cost to divorce that goes beyond just the heartache. And I guess the question I should ask you is, this is not something that I believe you should be handling on a do-it-yourself basis.
Absolutely not, and I think that's a big mistake that a lot of people make. Listen, it's not about having a lawyer negotiate an entire agreement for you or fight it out in court or anything like that. It doesn't have to be that nasty. A lot of lawyers work with other professionals, such as mediators, parenting coordinators, forensic accountants, like you said, to help us guide the process and deal with things in a quicker and more amicable manner. Of course, there are circumstances that do require court intervention, and that could get a little bit more nasty. But the reality is that you don't necessarily need to go that route. And what you really need a lawyer for is to be able to review any sort of final agreement that you get into, so that you can fully understand the rights and entitlements that you have, and anything that you may be giving up. Like I said earlier, it's not always about what the law provides for. It's about finding creative solutions that work for you and your family. So there's a lot of clients that come my way with an agreement drafted, and it may not be an agreement that I can necessarily recommend under the law. But that said, it may be something that makes sense for them and their family. So it's just a matter of understanding, like, hey, that's fine, you can do this, but these are the things that you're giving up. And people say, okay, no problem. Where issues arise is when you have these kitchen table agreements, where people think that they can sit down on their own and figure it out, and then they realize a couple of years later this wasn't a good deal, and then trying to unwind something like that, that's where things get really, really difficult. So I always recommend, even if you do want to draft the agreement on your own, at least bring it to a lawyer, at least understand what your rights are, spend that X amount of money to get upfront to get that independent legal advice, so at least
There you go.
for peace of mind.
Well, there you go. Laura Paris, this is not a pleasant topic. COVID-19 is not a pleasant topic. How we're dealing with return to school sometimes is not a pleasant topic. Having had the kids at home all summer maybe is not a pleasant topic. There are a lot of things that aren't pleasant, but they are things that we have to deal with, and these days they seem to be very intertwined. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much.
All right, that's Laura Paris, lawyer with Shulman and Partners.